Well, horrible anxiety, worry, and a feeling of helplessness. You wanted to do something, and very difficult to do as a bystander, basically a family, and that's really hard.
I think John's being sincere when he says you really want to do something. And the question is, in the Ramsey case, what was actually done behind the scenes? But is there anything else missing from that answer? I would say grief, because for John, the so-called kidnapping phase barely lasted half a day. And then he found JonBenet, and from then on, she was clearly not alive. And from then on, it was clearly grief. Another emotion I think is missing from his response is anger. If someone has come into your home, aren't you going to feel angry and kind of violated?
As they hope for a break in this case.
Well, the key is, police departments. We have 18,000 police departments in this country, and they're general purpose agencies.
I'm sorry, but I don't actually think the key is police departments. If you're a scholar of the Ramsey case, you'll know the Ramseys, all of them left Boulder, and the police department had to sort of go and find them in Atlanta. The police department in Boulder was sort of left in the lurch. And that was less than a week after the incident with JonBenet, when the police were still looking for suspects. That would be like Savannah Annie and her husband all flying to New York, like right now, or the Winter Olympics, when this case isn't even close to being solved 11 days into the investigation, and the police still need to speak to them about what is going on. I also disagree with John, and I would say the FBI are far better at this sort of thing than ordinary local police. They are specialists in this sort of thing. And it was the FBI, after all, who basically knew where to go and which resources to use to get that vital digital evidence in this case in terms of that recording. John also claims the FBI wasn't involved in the Ramsey investigation when they really were. Let's have a look at that. Ron Walker was the first federal agent to arrive on the scene on December 26, 1996, and that was around about 1 p.m. And Ron Walker later criticized the Boulder PD for failing to separate and interview the parents, John and Patsy Ramsey, immediately. So you can see the FBI know what to do, know what protocols to follow, and when this case happened in Boulder, the Boulder PD were looking for the FBI protocol to know how to deal with it. It's also worth pointing out that FBI agent Ron Walker didn't testify to the grand jury. He was on the scene when they found JonBenet. He read the ransom note. He was one of the first to see that something was kind of hinky with the note, something evidently the CNN reporter here interviewing John Ramsey perhaps hasn't figured out 30 years after the fact.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Now, if John Ramsey rates the FBI...
What's critical in what I watched in this case is that the police immediately get help. And for kidnapping, the FBI really has authority to come in on their own, but usually they are asked by the police. But that had to happen immediately. And as far as I could tell, it was fairly quick. You need to bring a lot of manpower to bear. And the local police department doesn't have it. I don't care how big they are, nor do they have the expertise.
Now, I think John Ramsey is right to rate the FBI, but if that's also the case, if John respects the FBI so much, why didn't he allow the FBI to polygraph the Ramseys as they wanted to? Because instead the Ramseys basically found their own polygraphers to do the testing, and this only happened in early to mid-2000 at the insistence of the media, by the way, while they were promoting their book, The Death of Innocence. They were on sort of on the talk show circuit, and that's how that question came about. Anyway, the next question John is asked is what the media spotlight felt like. And John answers that it didn't really matter.
Can you just describe a little bit about what that spotlight feels like on a family?
Well, For us, it didn't matter. We had been hurt deeply by the loss of our child. So the chaos that was going around is all this, the theories that we're putting out there, the media, and not so much online because the internet wasn't that popular back 30 years ago. But it didn't matter. It was noise level stuff. We had lost our child.
So the spotlight didn't matter, but John and Patsy went on to CNN on January 1st and gave an extensive interview. Savannah, who's a media journalist, hasn't even done that, right? It's day 11. She hasn't even given an interview. Also, you'll notice Patsy looked perfectly made up in her interview on CNN, whereas Savannah looks haggard, exhausted, and seems to have the approach that her appearance, how she looks, is the least of her priorities, which is understandable. Let's actually put Patsy side by side in that CNN interview with Savannah in one of her last videos. Also, the Ramseys hired a PR person within days, someone to manage the whole media thing, which clearly shows they cared very much what the media and the public thought of them. And arguably, that's why they gave their exclusive interview at CNN headquarters in Atlanta. They went to the media. It's not like the media came to them. They went to the media in Atlanta, Georgia. They lived in Boulder, Colorado. And they gave the exclusive there rather than to some local media station in Boulder, Colorado. John has also repeatedly said that the real crime in his case wasn't the death of his daughter, but what the media did to them.
The real story here is not that a child was murdered. The real story here is what was done to us by an unjust system.
Now, how does that square with saying we didn't care what the media or public thought of us? Anyway, I think whoever wrote the ransom note cared very much about appearances, which is why it ended up being 3 pages of flowery guff, but that's me. The Ramsey case, and I think this might be news to some in the news media, but the Ramsey case is actually an important example of what not to do if you're at the center of a crime scene. In other words, if you don't want your case to be solved, there's a certain number of things you shouldn't do. Number one, when you call 911 to report your crime, don't hang up on the 911 call operator as Patsy did.
Okay, I'm calling an officer over, okay? Do you know how long she's been gone?
No, I don't. Please, we just got out. Is she right here? Oh, my God, please.
Okay, well, I am, honey.
Please.
Take a deep breath,
Please,
okay?
hurry.
Patsy, Patsy.
Number 2, don't immediately call up your friends and then some other friends as well and your pastor to come to the crime scene even before the police have arrived. Number 3, if you get a ransom note, actually read it. As far as I know, John, Patsy, and Burke have variously been asked if they've read it and what they think about it and claimed that they didn't actually read the whole thing.
Have you seen it? Have you read it?
I don't think I've read the whole thing. I've definitely seen pictures of it, though.
Can you imagine Savannah Guthrie not reading any of the ransom messages? And can you imagine her not reading them 20 years later? Number 4, if the police ask you for a statement, don't wait 3 months or set conditions in order to try and give them all the information that they could possibly need. Number 5, don't have someone dress up as an officer and raid the crime scene before the crime scene has actually been released. Number 6, don't go over the police's head and talk to the media instead. Number 7, don't actively blame the police for not solving your case while it's still under investigation, even if they have made mistakes. Instead, actively support the police. Well, I think that's enough. That's 7, that's enough. But you may remember a few days ago, John Ramsey offered his expert advice on the Nancy Guthrie case as well. And his advice was to check for DNA. Now think about that. Do you think they recovered any DNA from this guy? Virtually his entire body, including his hands, face and feet, are covered. DNA is not going to solve the Ramsey case. DNA is probably not going to solve this case either. Figuring out the dynamics and following the evidence, and in this case we have fantastic digital evidence, and relying on the public to provide additional insight, I think that is how this case is likely going to be solved. Another word of advice from me, I wouldn't investigate this case in a play-by-play fashion. I would keep the public and the media out of it so that you can concentrate on what you need to concentrate on and only use the media and the public when absolutely necessary. Otherwise, you end up putting undue pressure and stress on yourself. Does that make sense? Also, I think right now the best bet is for people to recognize the person in the security footage, just as in the Ramsey case. One of the best bets was to ask the public as soon as possible, while memories were still fresh, if they recognized the handwriting or even some of the sentiments expressed in the ransom note. Anyway, I hope you found this analysis interesting. If you have, please do hit the thanks button. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.